Welcome back to China in the Hill, your essential weekly update on the U.S. China news and policy debates unfolding in Washington, D.C. and beyond. This week, we're here to break down the latest in U.S. China relations, from China-backed cyber campaigns in the Philippines to how Iran is skirting U.S. sanctions to sell oil to China. Let's get into it. Several new bills were introduced this week, focused on countering foreign threats and strengthening U.S. partnerships abroad. Senate Bill 2960 seeks to develop economic tools to deter aggression by the PRC toward Taiwan. Additionally, the Taiwan and American Space Assistance Act aims to enhance cooperation between the United States and Taiwan in civilian space activities. The Scam Compound Accountability and Mobilization Act aims to combat foreign cyber scams and hold transnational criminal organizations accountable for human trafficking and cyber-enabled fraud schemes targeting Americans. Lawmakers say many of these operations, often based in Southeast Asia and linked to China, lure victims into scam compounds where they are forced to commit online fraud under duress. The U.S.-South Africa Bilateral Relations Review Act calls for a full review of the U.S.-South Africa relationship and would extend the African Growth and Opportunity Act. The bill's sponsors argue that South Africa has increasingly aligned itself with U.S. adversaries, strengthening ties with Russia and China while taking hostile positions towards Israel and the West. The legislation seeks to ensure that U.S. engagement with South Africa serves American interests first. In this week's hearings, the Senate is in session this week. The House is not in session. On Tuesday, the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee met to examine combating the People's Republic of China's behavior in the Indo-Pacific. The Senate Armed Services Committee met for a hearing on threats and challenges posed to Department of Defense personnel. Despite U.S. sanctions on Tehran, Iranian oil continues to flow to China. Western officials estimate that in 2024 alone, up to $8.4 billion in oil payments were routed through a covert Chinese financial network. According to current and former officials from several Western countries, Iran has been skirting U.S. sanctions through a barter-style system in which Iranian oil is shipped to China, and in return, Chinese state-backed companies build infrastructure in Iran. The system reportedly relies on a little-known financial entity called Chuxing and the state-owned insurer, Sinosure, to move funds outside traditional banking channels. Even under the Trump administration's maximum pressure campaign, which sought to drive Iranian exports to zero, shipments to China have remained largely unaffected. U.S. estimates suggest Iran exported about $4.3 billion worth of crude oil last year, with roughly 90% going to China. The White House is preparing to roll out a new aid package to support farmers affected by the collapse of U.S. soybean exports to China. While details about the farm relief remain scarce, Republican lawmakers estimate that farmers may need as much as $50 billion in relief. President Trump stated that his administration will use funds collected from tariffs, though it is unclear if he can do this legally without Congress's approval. For months, Washington has been pushing Beijing to resume purchases of U.S. agricultural goods. According to people familiar with the talks, Chinese negotiators have indicated in recent meetings that they might restart soybean imports, but that the United States would have to reciprocate by easing tariffs. South Africa, which severed official ties with Taipei decades ago in favor of Beijing, appears to be moving to further downgrade its unofficial relationship with Taiwan. Last April, South Africa ordered Taiwan's senior representative, Oliver Liao, to relocate the Taipei Liaison Office, Taiwan's de facto embassy, from Pretoria, the administrative capital, to Johannesburg, ending over 50 years of representation in the capital. Taiwan refused to comply, prompting South Africa to retaliate by changing the office's official address and removing Liao's name from the website. Tensions further escalated this September when Taiwan temporarily banned semiconductor exports to South Africa, accusing Pretoria of actions that undermine national and public security. The ban was lifted 2 days later to allow talks to continue. In Washington, some lawmakers have grown increasingly critical over South Africa's close alignment with Beijing. The recently introduced U.S. South Africa Bilateral Relations Review Act calls for a reassessment of the relationship, citing South Africa's pro-China positions on international issues as a cause for concern. In other news, China reportedly paid a Manila-based marketing firm, Infinite Us Marketing Solutions, to run a covert online campaign aimed at undermining the Philippines' alliance with the United States. Internal documents show that fake Facebook accounts funded by the Chinese embassy amplified pro-China and anti-U.S. content, including attacks on Western-made COVID-19 vaccines and Philippine territorial claims. Infinite Us created a group of at least 10 fake accounts that regularly promoted posts from the Chinese ambassador's page. The firm also launched Nihao Manila, a media outlet made to appear locally run, purchasing hundreds of thousands of fake likes and follows to boost visibility. Filipino media personalities, including political scientist Rommel Banloy, were featured in the campaign. Many, including Banloy, reportedly received cash awards from the Association of Philippines-China Understanding, a group with links to the Chinese Communist Party. Philippine officials say the campaign is part of China's broader effort to sway public opinion and undermine Manila's partnership with Washington, even as the Philippines deepens its security ties with the U.S. Both China and the U.S. have engaged in information campaigns over the Philippines, but surveys show that public support for the U.S.-Philippines alliance remains strong, despite Beijing's efforts. Moving to maritime news, starting on October 14th, the U.S. will impose new docking fees on all ships owned, operated, or built by Chinese companies. According to the U.S. Trade Representative, the policy is designed to revitalize America's shipbuilding industry and counter what Washington calls China's unfair state-backed maritime dominance. The fees are expected to hit China's state-owned shipping giant COSCO hardest, potentially costing the company over $2 billion next year, according to HSBC bankers. To avoid the charges, some shipping companies may shift to vessels built elsewhere, such as South Korea or Japan, though analysts warn that U.S. importers could end up bearing much of the additional cost. Some experts say that the policy could be softened if President Trump reaches a deal with President Xi, but the policy underscores growing competition over control of global trade. In response, Beijing has passed a new law allowing countermeasures against countries imposing what it deems discriminatory restrictions on Chinese shipping. The U.S. is also weighing a 100% tariff on Chinese-made cranes and expanding the SHIP Act to close existing loopholes. And that's all for this week's edition of China on the Hill. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe to our new Substack for the latest updates, full transcripts, and bonus content, link in the description. For more from the National Committee, check out our other podcast episodes, or visit our YouTube channel for in-depth discussions, interviews, and analysis. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.